All right, everybody, we're just getting started just a few minutes early, and always better to get started a few minutes early than late. And hopefully you're here for the Ask Me Anything event, and we're getting started about an hour later than what I normally schedule these live streams on Tuesdays. And the main reason for me scheduling it later today was so that as much as possible not to interfere with the anti-tax protest that's going on at Olympia today. I know there was another little protest also up in King County kind of at the same time, just for people that maybe couldn't deal with the traffic heading south. But the main protest was at the state capitol. And as any of you might have noticed, because I know I've posted out a couple things and shared, just one lucky person at today's protest against property taxes is actually going to have their property taxes paid for, according to the Let's Go Washington folk. And I know that was posted up at Haywire and some other websites out there as well. But so I'm kind of eager to hear who exactly it was that managed to get their property taxes paid for, that lucky person, in comparison to the rest of us that are simply going to have to face the consequences of living in a state that, or certainly with the political class, who's chosen to abuse us as much as they possibly can. And it has been a week, interestingly enough, of a variety of abuses in the state legislature, so I think we're going to have plenty to talk about today. Just real quick, as a reminder, use the @WeTheGovern just to make it easier for me to be able to pick up your question. Usually there's a lot of commentary back and forth on the comment section. If you don't know where that is, it's either down below, depending on what type of, if you're just doing it on your phone, or it's on the side, typically if you have a laptop that you're looking on. I don't know how you're viewing this necessarily because you have a variety of options, but the best thing to do if you're catching me live is to, and you want me to interact with your questions, just try to use the @WeTheGovern. It just allows me to pick it out of there because there'll be a lot of commentary back and forth. If anything based on past experience is consistent with what's going on tomorrow or going on the rest of the day. Just because I get a lot of commentary, a lot of people are talking back and forth, and especially towards the end of the live stream. Usually that's when the questions start flooding in at the end. So it'll make it a little bit easier for me to pick your question out of the mix. One thing is I always have promised for a long time is to go through just a quick list of some of the events that I will be at over the next few weeks or so, in case you want to helpfully, if you want to attend some of these events, or you want to see me in person, or ask a question in person rather than doing it remotely on a live stream like this will give you that chance. And for those of you who were at the Tumwater Let's Go Washington event, or Tumwater DOGE Washington event that was last week, thank you so much for being there. I know there were quite a few of you, some new people that I have not met before. You will be followed up with shortly. We're kind of organizing a lot of our follow-up and team organization process right now. So I would expect you to be contacted by somebody from We the Govern, essentially, is DOGE Washington, as we're kind of organizing some of these teams. And if I saw you in Kitsap County on Saturday where I spoke, it was good to see a lot of familiar faces there and some new people as well. Again, the Kitsap County Lincoln Day dinner, a lot of good folk were out there. It was a good turnout. Sorry I didn't get a chance to meet the legislators who were at least planning to be there, but they were stuck in a all-day ledge event in Olympia as the Democrats are trying to deal with their own dramas and the chaotic world of the corrupt legislation that many of them are trying to push through right now. So anyway, there's a lot that's going on, but let me go through a few things. If you want to attend one of these DOGE Washington training sessions, I promise you there will be one close enough to you that you should be able to make at one of these weekday nights. I have scheduled quite a few already. If you go to the We the Govern website, you'll actually see on the website there a number of different locations set up. Quick review here, just for those who do want to attend those. There is one I'm doing tomorrow that wasn't advertised there because it was something I'd set up before, and this is just for activists who had already kind of set this up with me out in Pacific County, so I'm not so much advertising that one tomorrow. But Thursday, April 17th, I'll be in Marysville at the Reset Church. April 23rd, I'm going to be in Spokane. April 28th, I'll be in Tacoma at UPS, assuming they don't take away the room from us there. University of Puget Sound. May 1st, I'll be in Kelso at the Cowlitz County Republican Party headquarters. May 15th, I will be in Yakima at the Christian Center out there. I believe May 17th, this one's a little up in the air. I believe that I'm going to be in Caper, Spokane at the Ramada doing a train session that morning, and then I'll be flying back and getting to the Pierce County Lincoln Day dinner that night where I believe that I'm the MC. May 21st, I'll be in Skagit County doing DOGE training again. June 7th, I will be speaking at the Ellensburg Lincoln Day dinner, as well as June 9th. At lunch, I'll be speaking at the Silverdale Seabeck Republican Women's event. Even if it seems like I'm talking all the way out to June there on some of those events, there will be other DOGE classes, DOGE Washington classes set up in between. I'm just in the middle of conversations with local organizers all over the state and just trying to see which venue, which day works. I'm having to fit this in a little bit with some of my family schedule stuff too. Got two kids graduating, so there's graduation stuff coming up and final track season events and things like that all going on at the same time. But I believe I can usually do about 2, sometimes maybe even 3 of these a week, just depending on the travel schedule and what's going on. I think these are good opportunities if you've wanted to kind of dig in and meet up with other people and get more involved in exposing the truth about what's going on in local government. I think you'll find these classes productive. I learned a little bit just from this last one. I'm going to narrow the focus a little bit tighter on some of the future training sessions. So I think in Marysville, you're going to see, and tomorrow even in Pacific County, you'll probably see a little different presentation than what was in Tumwater. But as we tighten this up and get more efficient at delivering this information and helping people get organized and with a little bit of training so you can get started and get focused. I think that you're going to find these to be pretty productive, and I'm actually pretty eager to see the impact that we're going to have around the state. Another quick, just real start, something I usually kind of do in the beginning of these live streams. I recorded 2 videos today, one of which is going to launch tomorrow morning, and it's about the Washington State University instructor, professor there, not a full professor, but a PhD instructor who teaches freshman class, who decided to go out and beat up on a student that literally assault a student for wearing a MAGA hat just off campus. It was actually really right next to the campus. And the instructor and another paid WSU employee decided to assault the guy. There's a video camera. Jonathan Cho did a great job putting up a video with Frontline News, with TPUSA, and with Turning Point USA there, and the video is great. It's just a really well done video. I've linked to it in the video that I did, and I played a little clip just so you could see the surveillance footage of this aggressive, violent assault by this instructor. I'm going to put it parentheses instructor because obviously he's kind of a nut job. Wears a hammer and sickle on his official employee photo for the school, and he's obviously been doing his best to damage whatever students he happens to get anywhere near him, and clearly with a total willingness to commit violence against the students. He doesn't like their politics. So he was arrested for that, and they put him on I think a suspended pay situation. But one of the reasons why this went public was that some of the students certainly don't want this guy coming back and being employed by the college. And that shouldn't be difficult for them to make that decision, since WSU has a $16 million shortfall in their budget and they're actually having to do cuts. This is an easy one since he's obviously violent, and same with the other employee who works for the school there. 2 violent guys going around beating up on students are probably not the people you want to employ, even in a Washington State university. So that's a good video. Very happy that Jonathan Cho got that story out there. Very happy that Turning Point USA was willing to do the story, and I know they're coming out here to Washington very shortly as well. But that is a relevant story, quite impactful for Washington and worth getting out there. The other video I did was just more clarification for Senator Alvarado on the ethics complaint that I filed against her last week. or 2 weeks ago now, but then I did a video about it last week, and just detailing the way that Enterprise Community Partners, her employer, basically exempted themselves because they're a nonprofit, low-income housing, supposedly, provider, multi-billion-dollar provider. They say it's nonprofit. I don't believe it because everybody that works there seems to be making six figures, and there's a ton of money flowing around, and you, as the taxpayers of Washington State, also gave them an extra $2.8 million in commerce grants that were probably to the penny wasted and squandered on this organization, which has basically funded Senator Alvarado to go in there and push rent control that exclusively targets their competition and the renters, landlords, and exempts themselves from it because, after all, rent control is so awesome, the best thing you can do is exempt yourself from trying to follow those rules. And Senator Alvarado is a willing participant in violating Washington State's ethics laws by being personally and financially rewarded by an entity with whom she's basically given them exemption and getting paid by them when she's not in the legislature. It's obviously a violation of the state ethics laws. It's clear and unambiguous. I know she's pissed about this complaint that I filed against her, and I know she was crying on the floor and the wings last week. And I don't know if this had something to do with it. I hope so. But the point is, we have really, really bad people in Olympia right now. She's a poster child, as one of the examples of somebody that's just really not very good to have there. And we do need to replace those people with, people that are sane, people that believe math is real, people who can probably identify what a woman is, and people that are willing to actually be honest and not just rip us off every single time they go to Olympia. So I think that'll be a good video as well. Both those videos will launch this week. And if you're at one of these training sessions, I'm going to see you in person anyway. There are, I think it looks, if I remember, I've got another dozen or so training sessions that I'm planning to kind of fit into the calendar all the way out through the summer. And we'll see where we're at then. I'm hoping to train about 1,500 people, give or take. Maybe it'll be more, maybe less. We'll just have to see on how many of these events I can do, and attendance, and how value added people find the training sessions. So let's get into these questions. Let's jump right into them right now. First question up is NCL 6509C. A very interesting name there. Can the Republicans win again? And if so, what would be their leader? And I'm assuming what you're referring to is the Washington State Republicans. And the answer to that is yes, but I think it's way too premature to claim that there's some kind of leader. And I don't understand that people tend to rise to the occasion in which they're presented. There's not necessarily a preordained leader of the Republican Party, especially as free-flowing as it tends to be overall with the people who support it. It's not like the Democrats where they just take you out and completely destroy everybody who's going to be involved and train you, trying to eliminate and win of the field. The Republicans tend to be probably to their detriment a little bit, but I mean, it tends to be a real open game where basically almost anybody can jump in and run for office for any of these positions. You obviously have Jim Walsh, who's currently the chair of the state Republican Party. You have, and separately, even though it's not specifically with the party, but Let's Go Washington, Brian Haywood's been doing a lot of work. I think it's very easy to see that he's doing a lot of things trying to fight for reducing taxes and creating parents' rights, and then fighting the legislature as they're trying to take that away. You have other leaders that are local in the legislature. You probably have some people that we don't even know about yet who are probably going to come out of the woodwork. They may be known in some other capacity, but I could see them jumping in and being part of that process. There's no one leader specifically. There'll be a number of them. And I think some of the things that will impact Washington State, consistent with some stories that I've talked about before, but the impact on the election process is going to be fairly substantial, I believe, as it comes to starting to clean up the election system and the election voter rolls in Washington State. Ours are just as screwed up, in fact, probably worse than Oregon's, and they've already found thousands of non-U.S. citizens, and they're kind of voluntarily getting on that, but they're removing thousands of non-U.S. citizens from the voter rolls in Oregon. Arizona's removing 50,000, up to 50,000 non-U.S. citizens off of their voter rolls right now. We're seeing a substantial recognition that the Secretary of State in Washington State's just been lying to us, which is no surprise anybody who's actually paid attention to what's going on. And of course, everybody, in a way, I almost think he's being set up to lie, because the plan, I think right now, is Secretary of State, the local auditors, and the AG's office, they're all going to do this. Everybody's just going to point at the Department of Licensing. They're all going to blame somebody else for why they're breaking the law. But collectively, together, they all share probably some of the blame, but I think it's most likely going to be focused on Department of Licensing and their open and obvious effort to register people not to vote who shouldn't be registered to vote. Another story came to me recently. A friend's son was just going up to get his driver's license, and next to him at the Department of Licensing office in King County, there was a gal there from India who was getting a driver's license and was not a U.S. citizen and knew she was not a U.S. citizen. She's probably here on like an H-1B visa. So an educated, person trying to get her license so she can legally drive while she's here. And she said, and they gave her the driver's license and they gave her the voter registration or the voter information. She said, I can't vote. I'm not a U.S. citizen. And the employee at the Department of Licensing said, oh, it's too late. I checked the box. You're a registered voter now. That kind of stuff is going on every single day in most of the Department of Licensing offices. Anybody that tells you otherwise is just a flat-out liar, and they know it. I mean, usually it's obvious. Sit in one of those offices. You will witness it if you just sit there for a while. And by itself, that doesn't necessarily mean that all those people are voting. This lady probably knows that she can't vote, and so she's registered to vote, but she doesn't know if somebody else votes for her. I mean, it's very easy, unfortunately, in our state to basically get a copy of that voter registration and be able to access it. And with mail-in voting, there's no way anybody really can keep track. There's no chain of custody on what happens with your ballots. So this has been the continuous and regular discussion that we've had about the defects in Washington and the significant defects in Washington State's election system. That being said, the changes that are coming from the top, from the feds, just like they've come from the feds in the past, in the 90s and the 60s, and back in the 40s, and in the 1800s, the federal election reform is actually not uncommon. We're coming up to one of those eras, and there's obviously been enough issues. Some states are going to move ahead and try to get ahead of it, like Arizona, and even shockingly, to a little smaller extent, you're seeing it happen in Oregon. You saw some stuff going on in Wisconsin right now. But inevitably, the feds, Washington State seems to be one of the ones that wants to run into the brick wall, probably because of just how corrupt and dishonest the people are who work in a couple of these senior agencies, like the Department of Licensing. There's no way to defend what they've been doing, and they can't. They'll have a hard time denying it when it becomes public, but that's going to have an impact on our election system. And also, I think the Act Blue investigation that's going on right now into the corruption related to that, the money laundering operations and the falsification of original true source of funds, all that kind of stuff's going to probably reduce the amount of money that flows into the left-wing coffers in our state, just like it'll affect many of the leftist sort of operations in other states. Plus, cutting off USAID, which is our tax dollars basically recirculated back into the political process. That stuff changing is going to have an impact here. And but I wouldn't be so caught up in who's the leader right now. It's we'll have to see leaders step up, and we'll have to see who they are at that point in time. John Anthony, will gas keep going back up? And the answer to that appears to be yes right now. Now, part of it too, it's not exclusively the stupidity of Washington State's gas taxes, which are collectively utilized as a way to abuse lower income people in our state and everyone else just for the fun of it, so that you can squander your money with whatever wasteful programs they direct most of those dollars into. But it's also because there are a lot of other things happening. Now, America is actually a net energy producer. That changed, under the first Trump administration, and even though Biden administration kind of destroyed that, it is coming back pretty quickly, because nothing changes the fact that a lot of the energy is there, and you just have to go out and get it. But there's, with kind of the market chaos around the world, is going to have some impact on it. And what I'm seeing right now is a U.S. dollar that's also dropping a little bit in value, which will inevitably increase the price of gas as well. So, we'll see. I would anticipate, though, it going up a little bit for a while. Brian B., thanks for hosting the DOGE Washington in Tumwater. It was really informative, and I hope everybody in here can get out to your future events, as do I. So thanks for pointing that out. Brian, glad to see you there, and catch us on another future training session so that you'll see how it's kind of improved over time. This is NCL6509C. You're one of the only YouTubers that actually has easily accessible Q&A. Well, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I don't know any other way to run one of these live streams. It's not like I have done a ton of these in the past. I've only started doing these, I think, the last couple years, and I'm used to doing question and answer sessions at public events that I speak at. Certainly, if I'm the main speaker, I usually open it up to questions. If I'm doing training, there's a lot of interactive and questions in that kind of process. So, to be honest, this is a fairly comfortable format for me because I'm used to just dealing with questions in public settings, and I have been doing that for probably about 15 years now. So I'm pretty used to doing that, and the live stream is nothing more than kind of the digital version of this. I just can't see the people who are asking the questions, so sometimes it makes it a little bit harder for you to do a follow-up question, and sometimes I can't, I don't get your body language, so it's a little bit harder for me to understand. Sometimes we've had some questions that the context was missing, at least the way that the original person asking the question wanted it to be. But I'm appreciative of everybody who does want to ask questions and be involved in this process and watch me. You know, sometimes I don't know that I don't watch a lot of live streams myself, so I don't know why people would want to watch my live streams and ask me questions as much. So I don't probably appreciate that to the same degree that I think others have. But I've gotten a lot of feedback out there because I do a lot of programs and events in person. And a lot of you have come up to me and told me how much you appreciate these and you like doing these events. So I've made them a big, pretty consistent part as best I can on a weekly event. When I get things set up, I'm optimistic that I'll have my own studio pretty soon that I can utilize and actually be able to do probably more of these. And for the value that people seem to be getting out of it, I'm always happy to do that. David Newton, you're referencing the Wazoo professor on the hate crime. Sure, it was a hate crime, but remember, the way hate crimes are defined in Washington State, that only applies to leftist causes. You and I getting attacked for our beliefs, they don't count those as hate crimes. Magic Mirror at We the Govern, does the DOGE training cover what current state employees should do about mismanagement they see day in and day out? And the answer to that is yes, and we do want to help work with those people as whistleblowers. Recruiting whistleblowers and identifying sources and being able to utilize information from the inside of government, from the employees who see it and know it best, is actually a key part of what I've wanted to have done at We the Govern for a long time. We might call it DOGE Washington today, but essentially whistleblower recruitment is a big, big part of that process. These are good people, oftentimes working in jobs. I mean, I live in Thurston County. A little over 52% of the people who live in Thurston County either work for the state or another government entity, or they're married to somebody that is, and that's a big percentage of Thurston County where I live. So my neighbors and coworkers and friends and the people I run into at, Costco and Fred Meyer and Safeway and the gas station, they're also oftentimes workers, or they're family members that are workers in almost every state agency, which is why it's relatively easy to recruit whistleblowers and people who have inside information at these entities, because they can give you accurate information that lets you focus better on different problems in the state. So that is a big part, actually, of what I do when I'm doing, especially the more advanced training. This initial training is really more to get people focused on where their skill set is going to best give them value, or they're going to feel like they probably get the most value out of it, and link them up, or at least start the process of linking them up with teams of people who share their common interests and have the ability to work together to get a lot more work done, whether they're using records requests or whistleblower data. Let's see. Do you want to ask a question? Oh, that's funny. Okay, that's not a question for me. T.T. Burton, can you cover how Jay Inslee was able to appoint so many judges in the state versus the judge running for office? Absolutely. Here's how the process works. It's a total scam, and it's an inside game, and it's been this way for a while. People brought a lot of attention to it under the Gregoire administration. Originally, she was the former attorney general and the governor before Inslee, and so most judges hate the election process. They don't like the idea of running for office. They would prefer to be as remote and distant from you and I as they possibly can get. Obviously, they get to sit up on their bench and wear the dark robe during the judicial hearings and processes, but they really don't want to be that close to people. So it's just something part of it is going to come with the territory, because you're usually dealing with people probably at one of the worst days of their lives. Most people, I imagine, that judges are dealing with probably aren't super happy with them, and so they need to have, you can't have ex parte communication with people anyway, so they want to keep at a distance. Secondly, they hate elections. They prefer to be appointed. So the way the judges work in this state is that there's two reasons why a judge retires early. Number one, there's an age limit in Washington State beyond which a judge is not allowed to serve in office. So if they turn, I can't remember what it is, and I should know. If somebody knows it, just point it up. It's either, gosh, I want to say it's like 68 or 65. It's somewhere in that era. But anyway, once a judge hits a certain age, there's a mandatory retirement. Now, the problem is they still use the judges on like a pro tem kind of basis, but generally that's how it works. So even the judge will run for office even though they can only serve, say, a couple years of that office because they age out. And they don't care. They want to midstream through that process time their retirement so that there's an appointment, which is always done by the governor's office, for their replacement. And they do it midstream so that the new person has about 9 months or longer in office before they have to run for office. And by doing that, that gives them the mantle and the sense that they're an incumbent. And it gives them the advantage when they're on the ballot and running for office. And so that's how they keep out us busybody people from actually bothering to run for judge if we were qualified. And so it's one of the ways that they keep this tight circle. They're all appointed originally. They'll have to run for office later, but oftentimes then what they do is once they're in office, the judges, in combination with the Bar Association and other kind of tactics, hardball tactics, they'll play kind of like a mafia sort of game where they'll threaten any attorney that dares to run against an incumbent judge, especially if you lose. You basically won't win another case in court as long as you're in that courthouse anytime soon. They'll find ways to make sure your firm is punished, and that's why you'll see that there's very few judges, unless they've been endorsed by the Democrat Party and the political insiders around the governor's office. They won't run from big firms either, because the firms don't want to be collectively punished with their other cases that they'll have in front of those judges because of the rulings against them. So it's really quite a scam, and it makes it really difficult to recruit judicial candidates and to run them for office. And so because of that, you have an appointed sort of system that just keeps self-perpetuating itself to the point where we have just complete clowns and buffoons up in King County. It's not that you can't boot them out of office, it's that nobody bothers. Generally, there's been very little effort that's been effectively organized to actually go in and get new people elected to office. We had a couple of close times recently with some limited successes over the years, but because there's never been an organized effort to replace the bad judges that we have in office until recently, with full court press and some of the effort that's starting to come together now, but it means that we have this like historic inventory of just terrible people in the judicial office, especially like in Thurston County. I mean, universally to their core, completely corrupt people who exist there mainly to perpetuate the government, and they don't care about your rights or your freedoms. In fact, they despise them, and they view their position in office as judges as a way to promote their leftist ideology, and more important, to promote the big government that they're there to and established to protect, rather than your rights and your freedom. So it's a real issue. Let's see, going down. Yeah, that's funny. Julie Anderson, we watch you because you're super cool. If there's one thing I'm not, is very cool. So that's very funny. Matt M., all these new taxes, could Boeing finally say we are out? Well, keep in mind, Boeing moved out. Their official headquarters moved to Chicago a long, long time ago. They've moved manufacturing to many other states. So saying that Boeing suddenly is going to decide to move out tomorrow is a... they'd already made this process. When my dad was back on the city council in Newcastle years ago in the early 90s, it had already become apparent then that Boeing, I think they were trying to build this Ording plant, and they had so much friction and hassle from King County and local government in our state to make it so difficult for them to build more manufacturing facilities. That was when they started to decide to shift their manufacturing to other places and building new manufacturing facilities, because people were basically trying to, killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. That's a classic story. It's a long time history, by the way, in Washington State and other states. You've seen it elsewhere, of course, too. And Boeing has had to navigate that over the years. But I don't think these new taxes are necessarily that much different than the ones they've dealt with before. Daniel C. Black Cell. I've unfortunately opted to not vote in primaries because I believe my voter registration becomes a matter of public record. Any advice for the privacy conscious? Yeah, that's silly. Here's a little just reminder. Everybody in Washington State is essentially registered to vote. Voting in the primary, unless what you're really talking about there. Okay, let me back up for a second. So when you say primaries, I'm assuming you mean presidential primaries, which is the only way anybody can determine which party that you might be affiliated with, and that is that you vote in the Republican or the Democrat primary. And that's the only way, that one window of time every 4 years, people can figure out what your political party affiliation is, or at least whatever you admit your party affiliation is at that time. Now, I know a ton of people that actually purposely vote in the wrong primary that session because they're either doing, they're trying to screw up the other person's primary and they figure the Republican primary doesn't really matter, so they jump in, that year, and they jump in and they vote in the Democrat primary just to influence that one, then they'll jump back, they go back and forth. I don't see, that's the least significant thing in your entire life that's going to impact privacy, I think. Your name is all over your home, your business, your car, your identity, your license. Anybody that gets a driver's license, right? The Washington State Department of Licensing driver's license it's not like they don't hack that every other day. So pretty much your personal information, you're just not gonna be able to hide. You're not a secret. And there's no way to totally hide it. You can probably hide your party affiliation if you don't ever do anything on social media for the rest of your life, and you don't have videos that you watch at home and some kind of streaming service that can kind of estimate what type of party affiliation you might have. And if you don't subscribe to anything to your house, and if you pretty much just live in a box and just don't ever leave anywhere, maybe you could keep that a secret. But for the most part, pretty tough. And I appreciate it. Listen, I live rurally too. I don't want to be living in a downtown area. I like having some privacy where I live, but I don't think that's going to be how you get it. Michael Case, with the delay of implementation of HB 1163 until May 1st of 27, is there any political reason with Ferguson for the date extension? Yes, there is. And usually what they'll do is they'll kick these bills down, the implementation date down the road further and further when they know they're unpopular and that the policy is harmful and destructive. They did the same thing with the payroll tax on a while ago. I remember that. They kept kicking it down the road because they knew that it was going to be obnoxious and people were going to be annoyed by it. And so that is a common thing. If a bill is so awesome and so great and the policy is so amazing, no reason to kick the implementation period for a bill all the way down the road. But that is why they're doing it. And it makes it so that they can sign it, get the political benefits from the left for their signing, but not get the policy damage, and then they kick that down until the next administration, mostly. I mean, May 1st of 27 is a long ways down the road, and it's just a piece of legislation. They can decide to kick it and make it May 1st of 28 if they want. It's very easy for them to do that, and they've done that before. And HB 1163 is the bill that requires a permit to purchase a firearm. One of the strategies why they might be doing this is they're losing a lot of these cases in court, and they know it, so they don't want to have the legal defeat of such a stupid bill so early on, so they'll probably try to kick it. That's another good, I mean, I say good. I mean, none of this is good. This is all bad, right? These are corrupt people, and not oftentimes very smart. They're pushing delusional ideas that absolutely don't have any chance of working. The rent control bill is idiotic. I mean, listen, Argentina did away with rent control, and suddenly the rents all went down by 20% when they got rid of it. Argentina, which had had rent control for 100 years, I mean, these are stupid, dumb, disproven, bad ideas, and they're either still pushed because somebody spent too long in their crazy college class and actually were dumb enough to believe what their professor was shoveling out the door, or they live in such a bubble in their gated community over in Sammamish or Bellevue or somewhere that they just don't have any attachment to real life, so they can't relate to what they're doing and how it could impact anybody else because they're so rich they don't even understand anything. So these aren't the smartest, capable people. I mean, these are usually exceptionally incompetent, not terribly bright people that simply do what they're told and follow the herd. And so and then sometimes it's also about pushing the agenda that rewards. In the case of like Emily Alvarado, she's rewarding her employer, right? So the kickbacks, the grant grifting operations, and all of that, those are pretty important for them all. And there's a little bit of desperation right now because a lot of money's drying up, and there's nothing that's going to change the fact that that money is probably going away. The federal money is going to have to go away. It's just the general recognition that eventually you can only borrow other people's money for so long. The Margaret Thatcher quote, right? Eventually the problem with socialism is you do run out of other people's money. That's hitting the wall. And so all these programs are going to be cut and canceled and go away, and they know it. And trying to replace it with state dollars is particularly an illusion because that money goes away too. Nobody likes being there on the ship as their socialist dream ship starts to sink. So the panic and the overreaction and some of these things that you're seeing is really part of that right now, I think. Magic Mirror, we watch because are a straight shooter and the real deal. Oh, well, thank you very much. It's very nice to say that. Fed up and done with the BS. Okay. We watch because we appreciate you. Well, thank you. I imagine if you're still watching right now, and there's a number of people, about 133 of you right now who are actively watching, with another 522 total who have logged in and out at different times. But I really appreciate that. Thank you for being so nice. And I'm going to drop right down to the next question because I do intend to try to answer the questions that are sent my way here. Which of Ferguson's friends would take over after Ferguson resigns? Well, that's a great question. I don't see. First of all, Ferguson's not the guy who will ever resign. Now Ferguson won't do that. Judges will do that because they're coming at the end of their career, and not every one of them is going to be. They've made their six-figure salaries for a long time. They can kind of drop off. So. That's going to be, Ferguson's going to run out, he's just going to keep going until he hits the wall and loses. I do think, at least according to some sources on his staff, I think Ferguson's aware enough that he's actually not a good candidate to run straight up for the presidency. He isn't. Most people would recognize him for the person he is. So my sense is that, and what the rumor is that he wants to be a vice president appointment. You can't get a vice presidential appointment on the Democrat side of things if you're a crazy loon like AOC or somebody like that, because those are probably the people that will be taking point in the next Democrat presidential race, the next couple of them probably, until they finally decide that type of appeal to the crazy side isn't going to get them the votes that they're hoping to get. But that's most likely going to be the standard bearer. That's going to collect the core billionaire class and the grifting operations and the Coachella music festival people that like to go see Bernie Sanders. They're going to want that kind of person running. And so they'll think that by appointing somebody who appears to be moderate as their running mate, or boring, or at least not a net detriment, and they'll view Ferguson, at least Ferguson believes that he himself is that shadow puppet that can show up as a vice president, and then if he's lucky, set himself up for a presidential run after he's vice president for some period of time. And that's really the whole plan that he has there. So he's not going to resign. And the question is, who's the next person on the list on the Democrat side? And that I think is what part of your question there. And I don't have an answer to that. There is a unique vacuum on the Democrat side of realistic people that would be able to step up and do that. Probably Hobbs has an ego that's big enough to think that he would run for governor, but the Democrats don't like him generally because, and I think they're setting him up to be damaged right now by getting him to take the front attack against the Trump executive order on election integrity, because Hobbs probably just he may actually be genuinely ignorant enough to not understand that he was lying, or they set him up to lie as Secretary of State, pretending that there's not a problem with the election system. And that may be purposely being done because Hobbs views himself as a statewide candidate for higher office than just the Secretary of State's office right now. The Democrats don't like him, though, because he occasionally has ethics and morals, and he believes math is real. And so because of that, they don't like him at all, and they're planning to take him out. Frankly, they're planning to take Ferguson out right now because he wasn't viewed as extreme enough for the left party in the state. And so I would anticipate that they try to primary Ferguson in 2028, unless he's able to like completely shoot down enough of his opposition by taking out some of the support structure before they get there. So I don't know who the other Democrats were. They just, Jamie Peterson looks so crazy that you have to be in super small bubble world to think that he's got a chance. Maybe Monica Stonier has that kind of an aspiration down the road. She's out of the 49th legislative district. I don't know. I mean, we really got, I do think Lisa Brown, her ego is pretty big too. She's the mayor of Spokane right now on the Democrat side. I could see her maybe, getting that pitch out there as well. But there's not a lot of really good options on the Democrat side right now that are setting themselves up that aren't doing significant damage to their potential appeal just with what they're doing right now. So we'll have to see, but I just don't see it. It's not really clear. Let me just say that. Let's see. Any of the right permit. Sorry, I'm skipping down. I'm trying to get to the questions, guys. So that's the main thing. Have you ever been mistaken for Firefly actor Alan Tudyk? Is that how you pronounce it? Tudyk? This is by C. Price. No, I don't even know who that is. So I've never seen that show at all. So now you've like made me wonder, and I'll have to look it up. There is a just for like a weird story. There's a guy, I don't remember his name right now, but he's a sports medicine doctor, lives in Thurston County. He actually looks exactly like me. I feel really bad for him because probably he's been accosted in the street at times where people think he's me, and he's probably been threatened before. But I had two of his nurses actually approach me in public, once at Fred Meyer and once in a parking lot somewhere up in Tumwater. And I just remember they thought I was the doctor until I started talking to him, and then they realized I wasn't. But they both told me independently at different times that I was a spitting image of this doctor. And I actually looked him up at the time, sports medicine doctor in, I thought it was Tumwater, it could be Olympia. And to be honest, he did actually look a lot like me. So he would be, if I needed somebody to pretend to be a body double, he'd be like the guy. But at least a few years ago. But I don't know any actors that look even remotely close to me. Because if they did, they probably wouldn't be an actor. Let's jump on the next question here. Glenn, how can we make legislators toe the line to the specific language of the Constitution? They're passing some bills that are clearly unconstitutional. And this is from Sky King 337. Well, the main thing is just elect different people to get in there. And part of the thing is that there's always people will say, well, I'm not participating in the voting process because it's corrupt and it's all these other problems. I don't like the Republican Party, whatever it is. The problem is, abandoning the battlefield is just simply a surrender step so that you give away to the other side the worst people you can possibly find out there, and that's who you have in government now because no one is really standing up to them. And there's also an element of trying to run a real campaign. You can't expect to win elections if you run candidates who need drool cups to function in public. And that seems to elude people sometimes. They'll think that just because they're an alternative, that person's a legitimate candidate, and they aren't. Or people who have zero to bring to the political process. Politics is marketing. You're getting somebody in there to run for office, and hopefully they bring something with them more than the fact that they memorize the Constitution, which I completely agree with you. I think that's important. But we do get plenty of people on the Republican side or conservative side or liberty and freedom side who actually have read the Constitution, do understand it, and their charisma value is less than zero. And so they have no friend network. They couldn't fill a living room of people willing to donate or support their campaigns. And then they're stunned and shocked that somehow they lose. even though they're smart and brilliant and way better than the clown running against them. The default setting is that if you don't have a serious campaign, the bad guys win. That's just how it is. So you have to beat them with a really good campaign. And a really good campaign is not just going out and having a rally every now and then, or doing a podcast, or even doing an Ask Me Anything. Good campaign takes a lot of work, and it's a ground game out there at contacting a lot of people. It's very difficult to have an impact in the population around you and make them even just aware of an issue. And I remember this because when I was doing the Stop Taking Our Property Thurston County project back in 2011-12 in Thurston County, in that window of time, about a 2-year window of time, I remember doing about 250,000 pieces of mail. I did 12 town halls. I did 6 parades, put up 3,500 signs, doorbelled on about 5,000 to 6,000 homes, spoke at 150 public comment periods with lots of other people, big events, did a lot of stuff. And by the end of that, in the geographic area of Thurston County, which at the time probably had about population, say about 270,000, 275,000, give or take, it was, I would say, the knowledge that there was even something going on. I bet we were about 50% penetration, maybe 60%. There were still people coming up who had no idea what we were talking about, even after doing all of those things. Now, you could up the game and do a lot more, but it's very difficult to reach out. And a lot of people are living their life dealing with drama that for them personally is far more important than anything that you're going to talk about politically. So they got family issues, they have kids issues, they have career issues, they have jobs issues, they want to go play the Xbox all day, they want to go get drunk at the bar, whatever, right? And think about different periods in your life where you were more focused. There was a time in my life where I was more concerned about how many running races I had that weekend and whether the water level on the river was good enough for me to get the kayak in and run down, and whether the snow was high enough in the mountains that I could do my hikes that weekend, and whatever I was doing at work. And I wasn't paying much attention to politics at that time at all, especially in my 20s. So, everybody goes through those periods of time in their life, and imagine everyone else has that and fill in the blank for why, but they have that. You have to be realistic, I think. And so in order to kind of pop into their life, either you have to be government so abusive and dumb that it pisses them off, so they're willing to come back, or you have to just really do an extensive outreach effort, and it's not easy. Let's see. Oh, this is funny. Donald Larson, not a question, but I'll still bring this up. Ferguson doesn't meet the DEI criteria. Good point. He doesn't. That's probably a mark against him. And he knows it, so that's kind of interesting to see how he'll respond to that at some point in time. Fancy and family. How long has Washington State had mail-in voting, and is it a legitimate system? Well, I think it's not a legitimate system or an appropriate system to use for mail-in voting. Many countries have tried this in the past and stopped doing it because of corruption and fraud. Washington State started to implement extensive mail-in voting in the late 90s, mostly as a way you would sign up. And I remember because I was traveling for work at the time, and I had startup companies, and I would sometimes miss. I wouldn't be in town at all for the election period of time because I'd be out traveling, meeting customers in other parts of the state, or sometimes going to Asia with factory setups or something. And so I signed up when they made it possible to get absentee ballots. You could sign up listen, I'm part of the problem. At the time, I signed up for Washington State absentee ballot to make it permanent back in the 90s. And I thought it was great. So I'm part of the problem. They officially made they made mail-in ballots mandatory all across Washington State in 2011, and Pierce County was the last holdout. So Pierce County fought them until the very end. They still had precincts, and they were voting in precincts in some places, and Washington State came in and took that away from them. They were the last holdout. So it's really been permanently since 2011, but effectively it's been in place since the early 2000s. So, and that unfortunately was a big push. We had some secretaries of state, Republicans at the time, who really got caught up in this as an identity in pushing mail-in voting. The theory for them at the time, and this goes back to the early 90s when there was concern about voter turnout problems in America, And so that's why the feds pushed motor voter law in 1993 back in D.C., which applied to Washington too, and their theory was, hey, we'll do this to increase voter turnout. It really didn't work that well. Voter turnout didn't improve that much, and you didn't see a big change in Washington State either. Now, over time, there's been some voter turnout numbers that have changed, but there's a big question now because of the voter roll problem, which is an issue that I've talked about many times before. So if the feds decide that mail-in voting is no longer a legal way or an unfair or a dishonest or a corrupt way of electing people, and they want to go back to mail-in and in-person voting, then we're going to be behind the 8 ball because we'll have to try to do real elections here in the state, and I think that's going to be hard for them to do, and it's going to be hard for them to implement. Let's see, Dan McDonald, thoughts on people being sent to CCOT in El Salvador without any review? Well, keep in mind they aren't people. They're not just generic people. It's not like they're pulling people out of Evergreen and just throwing them on a plane and sending them to CCOT. They aren't going down and sweeping the legislature and sending all of our elected officials down there, even though that might be the place where they would deserve to go. They're generally, from what I can see, pulling people out that are being extradited, out as being non-U.S. citizens. And then, honestly, try going to another country that enforces immigration laws, so not Europe, but in a country that actually enforces them, and see how long you're going to last there as an illegal immigrant into that country. I remember traveling in Russia in 2004 when I was backpacking in Europe, and it was kind of impulsive. And I was with my wife in Finland, and we decided to go into Russia. And you want to know what it's like to go through an immigration process, look at going into a country that actually cares about their immigration process. And I wouldn't say St. Petersburg was not a very safe city to me, but it was beautiful. I'm glad I went. I would never go now. But, there's the rest of the world generally at times in the past has enforced their immigration laws seriously, taken them seriously. We decided not to. That's led to a lot of problems. And now you're stuck in a situation where, let's pretend you actually care about the rule of law. People that have been here illegally do have to be deported. Now, the question here, which is sort of related to this question that Dan's asking here, which is, what is due process? Now, due process there is going to be very different for non-U.S. citizens than U.S. citizens. There's some process you're going through, but it's going to be a different process than what you and I would go through if we were accused of assaulting a student wearing a Bernie Sanders hat at Evergreen State College, for example. So there'd be a different due process for that, and that's a much more clear due process. If you're not a U.S. citizen, you came here illegally, and you're just trying to take advantage of our country and take advantage of the services and benefits, you're going to have a different level of due process. And if you've decided to go out and murder, rape, and kill people, which a lot of these people have, the ones they're sending to CCOT, then I'm not going to waste a lot of time being concerned about them being sent over there if they're not a U.S. citizen. U.S. citizen, totally different story. We have plenty of criminals in our own country that we need to deal with. We don't need to be importing thousands and tens of thousands and millions more from other countries. And obviously, the people that we've decided to import from other countries who were criminals and rapists and child molesters and people like that, and those aren't the people that we want in our country at all. Daniel Blacksell, I used to work as a field rep for Leadership Institute and stay active until I moved to Redmond in 2018, keep my head down in such a blue state. How can I get plugged back in? Well, come to one of the DOGE Washington training sessions that I'm doing. I know we'll be doing one in Enumclaw. I don't think we've set the date on that yet. I have one up in Marysville. It's probably not super close to you when you're in Redmond. And the Kelso, Yakima ones are too far. But I know we're going to be doing one in Enumclaw pretty soon, so just make a point of coming up and meeting me, and I'll hook you up with people who are actually doing something. So I'm happy. Leadership Institute, I'm a big fan of the Leadership Institute. I love Morton Blackwell. I brought him to college back in the 90s when I was a college Republican back then, and really learned a lot, actually, and about just campaigning mainly, about structuring campaigning. And it was fun. I went back to the Leadership Institute, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. They brought me out there to help them with some curriculum development, and I had a chance to meet Morton Blackwell again. He's obviously a lot older now, but he's a genuine treasure in our country, and if you care about liberty and freedom, probably very few people in modern times did more to help advance those causes without their name being up on the bright lights or even being noticed or recognized. He did a lot of the hard work to train thousands and thousands of people to learn how to run campaigns, and campaigning far beyond the silliness that had been done before in the amateur hour stuff. So I always found Leadership Institute to be a great organization and very beneficial. Doesn't mean anybody's perfect, but I think it was pretty good. Donald Larson, why doesn't somebody submit legislation that you need a permit to vote and require training to obtain a permit? Yeah, you could. I mean, I think that'd be funny. How about a permit to speak and require training before you can participate in the political process? I think you could take the exact anti-gun control bills and draft the same version of that bill for every freedom that we have and just see what they say. But what'll happen is they won't actually give you a hearing. Let's see. Actually, here's funny, not a question, but I'm going to point out, Rebel One, and this is a reasonable point that you're making, not a question, but it is absolutely true that the Republic of California was the original land of fruits and nuts, and the disease rapidly expanded north along the left coast. But it didn't just go north, it went everywhere else. But you're highlighting a point that dumb ideas and bad ideology spreads like a disease. Karl Marx developed a system that would entrap and ensnare millions and millions of people and cause the death of millions of people moving forward as it was implemented. Because, of course, socialism, it just hasn't been properly tried yet. I mean, you've been told that in college, right? It's the purest form. I mean, the reason why socialism always fails is that nobody ever really tries it. I always enjoyed that pitch. So every single time socialism or communism or some collectivist utopia scheme, somehow it just seems to always result in indoctrination camps and re-education camps and killing fields and gulags and mass murder and disaster and nightmares. But it's just because they didn't try hard enough or do it in the purest way that they had to do it. So I always think that's funny, but funny in a bad way, but the reality is those terrible ideas spread far and wide. That's why moving to Idaho and Wyoming is not going to save you. This stuff has to be defeated in this country. We cannot allow it to just fester and continue to grow. I'm fully supportive of taking away money. Like, why are we giving money to Harvard in the first place? I graduated from Columbia. Why are we giving Columbia money? These are wealthy colleges. They don't need a single penny of taxpayer support, and they don't deserve it anyway. And they waste a huge amount of that money when they're there. I remember when I was a student at Columbia, I had a girl in the group that I was in, the College Republicans, and I don't remember, she was an active member of the group, but she wanted to write journalist stories about how Columbia was ripping off students. It was like a DOGE before it was ever cool or even conceived of. So she was writing about how, like, you would change a lock at the Columbia and it would be a $30 change and the school would charge you $600. And she was arguing that this was influencing this bloated cost of tuition that all the students were paying. And if you were a lower income student, even though you have financial aid, you're still stuck paying the ridiculously overpriced tuition that you shouldn't be paying. And here's one of the reasons why. And she was doing a little series of stories about it, which I was supporting and helping her with, until she got threatened one day where they said she'd end up in the East River and nobody'd ever see her again if she kept writing those stories. Probably it was the union that threatened her, but when she came, she said she was done and she just wanted to graduate and get the heck out of Dodge. I didn't blame her. These colleges don't deserve that money. You simply fluff up stupid degrees that mean nothing. They're garbage degrees, and instead of focusing on education that's value added and somehow controlling the cost. I remember even at that time, the university had increased its student enrollment over 20 years about 1% a year. Roughly, the professor increase was 1% every year, but the administrative costs had gone up 300%. And that was with computerization, which was, of course, sold to us as a way to reduce the number of people that you have in the college. And it never does. So imagine how bad and bloated government is. We're barely beginning the reform process right now, and it just needs to be done. And we just have to keep working it. And Diane, I'll emphasize this because I just happened to catch this. I think one of the things is we have such a beautiful life in this wonderful state. People don't pay attention. That I agree with. We have a much easier life here than many people do in most states. And so what happens is you aren't paying attention until the disaster comes your way. Donald Larson couldn't. By the way, the reason why I didn't go at we the govern there is you misspelled it. Couldn't everyone find a way to hold or stop property tax and then prevent the tax lien claim process as through the illegal takings clause? Yeah, I don't think that's going to work too well. The issue is you have a 3-year window of time in which you get your taxes paid, or they can, under Washington state law, seize your property and sell it. So most people are not going to play Russian roulette or chicken with their property or their home if they've managed to own the home and they just don't want to deal with it. So my guess is that's why nobody's going to do that. And there has been some pushback on that. I know this whole property rights fight. Texas is leading. It's coming out of Texas because the way their property tax is set up down there is so bad. And I'm familiar with some of the lawsuits that are going on to eliminate property tax as an option. But right now, we still are in the world in which we have it. So anyway, we'll see. Tom, I don't know that I answered your question, so let me go back to that. I wouldn't do that, and I don't recommend it, just for clarity sake. And I don't see any practical way to implement it either. Tom Wickman, how can we be sure a political donation will be spent in a reasonable and legal manner? And the answer to that is absolutely, there is no way you can actually be sure. If you like, part of it is legal. Odds are your donation will be spent legally. It's especially with both FEC, to a lesser extent FEC, but certainly PDC rules. I'd be surprised if they spend it completely illegal. Now, there's nothing in the law that prevents them from spending it stupidly. So they can give their consultant a big 6-figure payday, which they probably don't deserve. They can overpay for their advertising costs. They can spend it on dumb expenses that probably aren't optimal. You have no way to control that. To some extent, you're making a political donation, and you're just hoping that they spend it in a way that has an impact. So you're going to have to trust they're running a reasonable political campaign. Very hard to be sure, and some are run well, but it's not as easy as you might think. Kim Kendall. Hi, Glenn. How is it okay for the politicians to even make bills that are knowingly against the Constitution? It is such a waste of tax dollars and time to have to take the issue to court. Thank you. Great question. And if we had an honest attorney general, which we don't, if we had an attorney general's office that was even remotely attached to reality, which we don't, and if we had a Supreme Court that both read the state constitution and believed it and enforced it, because we actually have a pretty good state constitution, there would be ways you could challenge those without having to go through the full legal process. Even AGO's attorney general opinions or reviews in that way, you could probably make some impact. But you're right. It's just they purposely do it, I think, sometimes so that they can burn up your money on litigation, knowing you only have so much of it. The left used to participate a lot more in lawfare. They still do, but I don't think it'll be as easy for them now with USAID going away. They would do these sue and settle cases, especially Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife cases, Endangered Species Act cases. And it was just a scam. They would sue everybody's friends. They know they're suing, and they just want to collect a paycheck for their attorneys. Everybody gets rich, and they get what they want to be achieved because they get the federal agency that really does want to abuse the people anyway, and they don't care, so they'll declare a species that doesn't even exist endangered, or they'll do some other dumb thing, and as long as everybody's getting paid, they kind of like it. This reminds me, and I'll just tell you just a quick story here because you can't believe something. So there was this, I think it was Port Angeles. It was Port Angeles. It was an old pulp mill that had become a hazardous cleanup site for the feds. So the EPA was basically owned. There was a company that owned it. The original logging company was long out of business, and it sold, and then whoever the owner of it currently was, it sat there. And there was an argument back in the late 90s that what the heck are we doing? The EPA, they're never going to come out here and clean up this toxic mess in downtown Port Angeles. So let's transfer supervision and control over the cleanup to the Department of Ecology, because after all, and I generally would agree with this argument overall, there's some rational thought to this. After all, it'd be much easier to argue in Olympia trying to get them to do their job than with the feds back in DC who just don't care. So they made that transfer. Department of Ecology took it over, and then they promptly did nothing for 20 some odd years. And the way the scam worked was that they got the tribes involved and in the process, and were paying them money. And the only way the tribes got that cash every year was if the place wasn't cleaned up. The business owner, the people that actually own the property, they didn't want to spend the lots of extra money to clean it up. So they were willing to pay just a certain smaller amount every year just to keep it from being cleaned up. And the Department of Ecology employees were just happy to get enough money every year and achieve nothing, do very little work, and put their kids through college and live out in Port Angeles, which is a beautiful place, and do nothing. And at the end of the day, nothing gets done and nothing gets cleaned up, but the environment isn't improved, nothing gets achieved, and it goes back to the core message, right, that Thomas Sowell once said, right, the only way you'll ever understand bureaucracy is to recognize that outcomes are nothing and process is everything. And that's how you deal with, or recognize anyway, the fundamental weakness of a bureaucracy and why they will not achieve anything, unless you really hammer on them or downsize them. And of course, the bigger they get, the more bloated they get, the worse they get. Here it is, NCLL 659C. Do you think that parties like the Green Party can help the Republicans in local and maybe in the governor's race? Yes, and when the top two primary system got implemented, which meant that only the top two could come out of the primary system, that essentially killed all third parties in Washington state, because there's no practical way for a third party, in most cases, to survive the primary process because of the familiarity the average person's going to have with Republican, Democrat, blue team, red team, my team, your team. People will vote for those people, even if there's a spectacular third party candidate in the race. There are examples occasionally where that doesn't happen. Thurston County's had independents get elected frequently. But if you go back and you look at those races, in most cases, the independents only got elected if Republicans didn't run. There was one cycle where an independent who was a much superior candidate had a Republican candidate jump in the race who was a clown, and the Republican was able to survive the primary simply by name, not true name recognition, but recognition of the party affiliation. And the independent, even though he had quite a resume, was lost, even though it was close, but he still lost. And it's difficult to overcome that. So the third parties are essentially dead in Washington state as long as the top two primary system exists. They'll really almost never have any direction that they can go. Now, it doesn't apply to the presidential race, but all other races, third parties are useless. But sure, you can encourage Green Party voting. It just won't do you any good for most of the local elections. And that is why he said that we need to get rid of the jungle primary, because jungle primary produces those results. And here's somebody mentioned. Alien Enemies Act requires no due process, which is true. And I'm assuming you're referring to the El Salvadorian that was deported to El Salvador, had a habeas hearing, and then he was goodbye. And the answer is yes. And listen, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you aren't subject to the same rights and rules that U.S. citizens would have in our country. And that's just rational, it's logical, it's still the rule of law. And the process, and you need to have some kind of an efficient process that lets you get people out who shouldn't legally be here. So I think those are pretty reasonable expectations. Let's see. Just got back from the tax day rally. Thank you. I was hoping for somebody to jump in there and give us a quick update on this. There was a ton of people at the Capitol. I'm very, very glad to hear that. And I would like to know what size of crowd that was there. I wasn't sure. I tried to start this later just so it was less of an interference. So I was glad to hear some people coming back from that and hearing about it. So I hope people took photos. I will probably do a video about it this next week. I don't think I'm going to have time to get back. I don't think I'm going to have access to the studio, so to do another one on this week, I would like to. But if you can send photos to me at my email, Glenn@WeTheGoverned, Glenn with one N at WeTheGoverned.com. Be happy to get those photos from you and see what it looked like. I'll probably check in with some of my friends to find out how the protest went. But glad to hear there were a ton of people there. And I'm hoping, listen, if you're paying attention to what's going on in Olympia right now, it's interesting. There's a lot of insane, dumb ideas in Olympia. There usually is, but with the Democrats as much of a majority as they have right now, they particularly became navel-gazing and so obsessed with themselves that they just produced a plethora of insanity this cycle. What's interesting about that is that some of them are starting to walk back from the abyss. Either they've discovered math is real somewhere along the way, for instance, the strike bill, remember that they're going to give special, they wanted to financially reward people who go on strike with unemployment during the striking period. And remember, the whole point of a strike is that the employer is suffering because they don't have the workers, in theory, and the workers are suffering because they don't have a paycheck. And that's what kind of forces, at some point in time, the two sides to come together and resolve their differences, because there's an outcome that hurts both sides. And so what the state proposed, because the last vestige of any attachment to numbers of people who believe, who are willing to support the Democrats, is mostly in the public sector unions now. So as a sop to the unions, they made this proposal to give 12 weeks of strike or of unemployment pay to anybody that goes on strike. And that's a terrible idea, obviously moral hazard that it introduces for particularly the WA, for their absurdity and ridiculousness associated with how they run their operations there. They would go on strike all the time, destroying school districts right and left, and living large. I mean, listen, you couldn't get teachers, the WA, to go back to school. It took a massive effort just to get them to go back to school. They were living on a holiday while the kids were doing Zoom school, supposedly, and it was a terrible time to have your kids in school. And some teachers, of course, didn't like it, but a huge number of them thought it was great. They didn't have to deal with those bratty kids at home, hit the Zoom training, and go to sleep, I guess. But anyway, it's even worse if you're going to pay them unemployment for 12 weeks. And the Democrats surprisingly took away 8 of those weeks. Now they're back to 4. And they did that without the Republicans really being part of that process. And the Republicans opposed it. And the Republicans still are opposing it. But the Democrats, somehow, somebody in there discovered math or reality. I don't know what happened, but they suddenly decided to cut that back. And that was interesting. Even the drama that's going on right now with the dumb rent control bill that I filed the ethics complaint on, I've done some videos about, or the decision to drop the wealth tax because Inslee said it was, or Ferguson said, it was insane and not going to work. Or the fact that Seattle suddenly discovered not just that they had a $47 million hole, but they're actually almost $150 million underwater based on the series of stupidity that has been occupying those offices for a long time. And now some of the costs of those consequences are going to come forward and impact them. Somewhere along the way, this is starting to wake up Democrats, even in the state legislature, and recognizing that they can't quite do all the craziness they've wanted to. Taxing cow farts, for example, that one went away. A lot of these other dumb ideas are largely dying, and we're in this final stage where a bunch of these bills will die. So property tax is getting a lot of pushback for sure, and we'll just see how it goes. All right, guys, I'm going to start wrapping this up. I think I've answered all the questions anybody actually put forward here. We had about 973 people on this live stream tonight so far. I know there'll be a couple thousand more that probably watch it over the next few weeks, but there's 162 of you out there right now. So since I can't see you in person, I just want to close with just a quick reminder. If you haven't done a DOGE training and you're interested, please pay attention to my main article on the We the Government website, as well as you can go back and look at the video too, because I'll update the description section there. But I'm going to continue to provide this information about upcoming DOGE training classes at that website link. So if you want to know where there is one, as they're getting confirmed, I'm putting the information in there. I think you'll find this a couple hours well spent. You get an opportunity to talk to me directly. Even if there's a really large group there, I will be taking some questions, and certainly I'll stay around after each one and train people some more. And if there's follow-up teams, I'll probably be helping to do a lot more work with that. Mario, yes, you have my permission to publish my article on the upcoming. Yeah, I've already published the article, so feel free to cut and paste and plagiarize as you see fit. Just so you know that the parts that are going to change, because there's not much of an article there to it, just simply outlining it. The big parts that are going to change are just when the training sessions are scheduled. And anyway, I just want to make sure that And here's just a real quick thing. Yes, send me that video of that school board meeting that was disrupted by the trans group in Tumwater. I do want to see it. I heard about that. That was a work session meeting, and I wanted to get more once somebody has it. And Mario, I'm going to repeat this again. No problem. You have my permission. You can save the video if you want. But yeah, if you want to print it up there, go ahead. Anyway, I hope all's well. And we will be doing, as I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of training coming up. I might see you guys potentially at some of these other events around the state where I'm speaking at as well. It's going to be a busy few months for me, and hopefully that means that we can do something value-added out there. Enjoy the next videos that are coming out this week, especially the one launching tomorrow about the assault at Wazoo by the PhD instructor / professor deciding to beat up on students who had MAGA hats on. I'm just interested in the feedback on that one. And we will see you next week. I'm assuming next week will be at the same time. I know it was late tonight, but with that, everybody be safe out there, and we will see you then. And just remember, the future belongs to those who show up. I truly believe that. Find and pick your passion and your skill and see where you can make an impact where you live. So we will see you next time.